Yeah, warm welcome from my side. My name is Tommy Klemken, and I just give you an overview now here for open science, rather for OSF, but you cannot talk about OSF without open science. So I prepared just a few information for you, and I hope it will help you, although be assured that this is not everything there's to know about it. But the idea is, of course, to give you a general idea of what to expect from OSF and why to use it. And we definitely recommend to use it. The first thing, open science, right? So if you think about open science here, this is, for example, a classic view. Then you have several kind of categories where open science is relevant. There's, of course, open data, that more and more data sharing is now done in order to make sure that actually people come to the same conclusions based on the same data. Then we have open access, right? That's often something that is known in terms of negotiations with all the different publishing houses. We have open education resources. We have an open peer review. That some journals like BMJ Open, for example, they make it fully transparent who the reviewers are. Other journals, they allow to publish the review process, right? The comments and how they were answered. And all of this, of course, makes science more open. And then there's, of course, open source of materials. But most importantly, and the thing we talk most about here is open methodology. Because if you do experimental research, this is absolutely crucial that you're open about what you set out to do, how you want to investigate it, right? And to explain that early on, I would later talk about why this is so important. But all of this makes up more or less the open science movement, or at least critical element of it, or elements of it. And yeah, and this is something I think we should embrace as researchers because it really helps with the reproducibility crisis and making sure to distinguish between good and bad apples, between higher and lower quality, and also in terms of making it easier for researchers to actually think their projects properly through before they set out to do that, to do what they plan to do. All right. Then let me continue a bit. I go to the next topics. And what is OSF? So very simple, OSF stands for Open Science Framework, and it allows you to deal with a number of these open science categories that we saw earlier. It's a free open source online platform designed for researchers and researcher needs, right? We will focus primarily on OSF registries, but there are also others there that you will probably see, like we're publishing preprints there of your papers before they are actually published. All these kinds of options, of course, exist as well. And how OSF supports open science. It facilitates sharing of research data and materials and so on, but it also facilitates the sharing of how you approach a project before you actually started to collect data. So this is definitely things that are in there and that help to yeah to make sure that we can select based on the higher quality later on in the review processes. It promotes transparency through public documentation, and that means that it makes transparent all kinds of things, like how the paper looked like before a peer review in the journal, the same as how your approach was initially, what was the research question you set out to analyze. All of this is considered transparency, but also how you wanted to analyze a certain data. Also, this can be counted as transparency because if you change the analysis strategy based on the results, then of course this comes with all kinds of issues for experimental research. So it encourages actually best practice in research workflow. And I would see that basically as a chance for researchers because if you all want to have better research workflows, and sometimes we can work even in academia quite intuitively. And here it really helps you to think everything through because it can help you to set up a project in a way. And when you have to make the project transparent before you do it, then this typically triggers all kinds of thoughts. Then the next thing, the pre-registration, and that's the key thing I want to talk about. Like I said earlier, this is just a part of OSF, of what the platform offers us. So this one is documenting your study design your research hypothesis, your methods, and your analysis plan before collecting data. And any of it disclosed is better than none of it disclosed, right? Because that's all helpful in the end in order to make sure, okay, this data was collected for this and that purpose. And we can get to why that is so crucial. Yeah, why pre-register? I put a number of reasons here. Some are just from experience. The first thing is what is probably also meant to work for is it prevents p-hacking to some degree because you can no longer as selectively report favorable outcomes, right? Because if you refer to pre-registration, then you make it transparent what your research questions were before the data was collected, and it gets a timestamp and everything. So it reduces hacking, so hypothesizing after results are known. So these are probably more of what I've described now, but this, of course, is a bit linked. Whether you look just for significance in terms of what you test, what kind of hypotheses are tested together, or whether you look into what kind of hypothesis you actually set out to do. Then next thing, it helps to structure a priori research. So this is a key thing that I also wanted to hint at. And this means it asks you a lot of questions in the pre-registration, questions that you might not have dealt with before, but you should have, because they will come up during your project at some point. And it's absolutely crucial to think about them beforehand. This also comes with all kinds of other advantages, right? If you have such a structure for a pre-registration ready, then this also means for all your collaborators to make it transparent what you want to do. And so they cannot say, oh, this and that should have been considered. Because if they read the pre-registration, they have more or less like an agreement on how you want to work. So it's much harder to criticize you in the end. So really see this as an opportunity to find some common ground early in your research process. It helps to differentiate confirmatory from exploratory analysis. That's basically the same thing, just about being clear that some parts of your research and analysis might be exploratory, that you did not have an hypothesis for them before. And typically, if people do pre-registrations, they're much more open to report what was exploratory and what was actually with a clear hypothesis, and you just want to confirm or reject the hypothesis, or not find sufficient evidence for the hypothesis, how we would rather talk in statistical terms. The next thing, it helps an argument during reviews. If you want to sell a different story and then the reviewers want to sell, right? Because you have a pre-registration, you have something you and your collaborators agreed on. So reviewers cannot shift it anyway. I mean, if they make a suggestion that is clearly better than your own, I would definitely consider to go against your pre-registration, making that transparent that you go against your pre-registration and follow reviewer advice. However, in some cases, it might be that it takes you down a totally different path that you are not willing to go down. So in that sense, it might just be a small additional argument that helps you to defend why you proceed with your research in a certain way. So when to pre-register? Yeah, definitely after finalizing your research plan, but before the data collection begins. That's the ideal point. However, you also find that, and you should find that more and more, that people actually register even if they have secondary data, and then they register before they started the analysis, like make the pre-analysis plan, also part of open science, of course. And this can make an awful lot of sense, of course. In an experimental study where you collect primary data, the ideal point is definitely before collecting the data. And the other one would be a second best. All right, but at the moment you're ready to pre-register, these are the steps you should follow. And I just wanted to briefly actually share my screen and show you a bit on where you land if you go to OSF.io, which is the domain here. Yeah? Just hold on a second and Yeah, so that's the starting page of OSF.io. And the first thing you need to do, of course, is you need to sign up. Ideally, you can also link your profile to your lab or whatever context you want to link it to. Most importantly, when you register, you can always link it also to your collaborators, right? That's important because then they actually have to approve for you to move forward. And that can also be a bit of an agreement that you do, especially if somebody is in a supervision role with you. All right, so here, OSF home, we have OSF preprints. That would mean a preprint server where you, as I said before, can publish a paper before you actually submit it. And we, however, want to deal with the OSF registries, as I said before, because that's key of this video. So here, the options that you get is you can look at your registrations. You will see I'm not super active, but I have quite a few, I would say, that are already in. And I definitely recommend this process. That's also why I make this video. I think it helps to really improve research quality. And yeah, as you see, it's even easier to log in if you already have an ORCID account, which I also recommend doing in any case. Then you can see here your drafts, the one you're still working on, the ones that are submitted. Also, you can, of course, withdraw in case something was not as you agreed upon. You could also make adjustments to that. You could, even after pre-registration is published, you can, of course, publish another update of it. That's feasible, but you can also go in the paper say that that deviations became necessary from that. It's just about trying to be really transparent on at which step you did what. Right, and so you see here a few registrations that you have, but we want to focus on the new ones, assuming that you are new to the platform, of course, and therefore have to start a new one. Now, what you can do is you can first of all say that it's not related to any existing one, but if existing project that you have registered here, because this is how you can group pre-registrations together in a project, which can also make sense if collaborators are changing a lot, but that you at least have a project structure or a lab structure where you pull it together. But yeah, this is not necessarily the case and doesn't need to be the case for you in the beginning. But the first thing then, what you would start with is that you look for the right OSF template. And there are multiple ones. If you don't know which one to use, probably use the OSF pre-registration, a very general one. However, if you do a systematic review, use the generalized systematic review registration. It's really helpful in asking questions specific to a review or to make sure that you make your review research as transparent as you can. Then there are other ones here, OSF standard pre-data collection registration, and also for collecting all kinds of specific data, registered report protocol, which is of course a bit deeper into where you actually try to publish methods in some way. But there's also others that are specifically suited for experimental research, right? For example, as in psychology, or in social psychology here, this one, for example. So this might be the most applicable to you. However, as I said before, if you do not know which one to use, and you do not have a good starting point, you don't think it's classic social psychology, experimental research that's most behavior focused or whatever, and you're just in doubt, you start with the general OSF registration. So that's the only one I can briefly introduce to you here now. And then you will see that you register like a working title, a description of the project, right? And some informations on the license that the published information here will have. And there's of course also options to delay actually the pre-registration in terms of being published. It would mean an embargo period that nobody else can basically steal your idea if that is your worry. It could also be helpful, right, to get in touch early with people that are working on the same topic. So you could see it both ways, but this is of course an option that you have here to get a publication only later actually being publicly visible, while still getting the timestamp from back when you submitted it here and it was approved by everybody. So yeah, you enter study information. This most importantly, of course, your hypothesis, right? That's the whole idea of doing confirmatory research. You have to have hypotheses. It's important. You have a design plan, right? How you design your study and blinding things, but this can also be about your treatments and other things. You have a sampling plan on how you select the other people. So you have certain variables that are clear, that are being collected, right? That are needed. That can be your key treatment variables. That can also be key control variables. That can be, of course, the dependent variable. All of them should be transparently described beforehand in terms of what they include. And yeah, ideally, you also manage to get a bit an idea of an analysis plan on how you can actually report on your hypotheses to make sure that your hypotheses are answered in a certain way, and there's no wiggle room to say like, is a 5% level really sufficient confirmation of my hypothesis? But yeah, simple things like that can be really straightforward about that. And of course, it gives also an idea of the type of model you wanted to use and how much you changed your model. And so ideally, you have a good idea of how the analysis looks like. And it's always something I always recommend thinking through before actually collecting data, setting up your study, because sometimes your analysis may just not fit the type of data that you collected. In others, of course, you can also have room for exploratory things, and maybe it might be an advantage to already say that a few things should be analyzed exploratory here, because you make that transparent from the start, right? That is helpful to register, and it gives, of course, all your collaborators a good idea of what your project is about at the moment where there's, of course, no research paper to read of any type. Right, and then you review all the information and you can register it. That's the key idea here. And that's also how I want to close it. That's my brief overview. I thank you for attention, right? And if you have questions, put them in the comments. Otherwise, I wish you good luck and yeah, be patient. Sometimes it's not the most intuitive platform, but it's probably one of the most valuable platforms in terms of doing high quality research in modern days. Thank you for your attention.